All right, so you wanted to take a deep dive into what's happening with the war in Ukraine, especially with 2025 just getting started. We're looking at this article, Ukraine-Russia War Map. Where are Putin's forces making gains on the front line as 2025 begins? And, well, it's complicated, to say the least. But that's why you're here.
Right.
Your expertise in military strategy and all things Eastern Europe is going to be super helpful to break this down.
Happy to help unpack this.
So to kick us off, can you paint the big picture? Like, what's the overall situation on the ground?
Sure. So, I mean, as you said, it's complex.
Yeah.
Some areas, it's a total stalemate. Ukrainians, Russians, they're dug in. You almost see, like, echoes of, like, trench warfare from the 1900s.
Really?
But then in other areas, it's super intense. Every inch of ground is being fought over.
Wow.
And gotta remember, this is just a snapshot. Things are changing so fast.
And speaking of fighting over every inch, this one detail in the article, the fighting around redacted city name, that really stuck with me. What's so important about this city? Why are both sides, like, obsessed with it?
So what's interesting is redacted city name itself, it's not a huge city.
Okay.
It doesn't seem that strategically important at first glance.
Right.
It's not like a major transportation hub or anything like that.
Right.
But when you look at the map, it's near all these smaller roads.
Okay.
And controlling those roads, that's a huge advantage for supplies.
Oh.
Keeping your troops supplied further down the line, it's kind of like
I see, yeah.
chess in a way. Like, even those seemingly unimportant squares, they can determine who wins the whole game.
That's a really good analogy. So even small places can have big consequences. What surprised you most about this detail?
You know, I think what surprised me is how much it shows how war is changing. I mean, in the past, you'd fight over big cities, resources, but today, it's all about logistics, how fast you can move troops. So yeah, even a bunch of small roads, that can become a battleground.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how wars will be fought in the future.
Yeah.
But let's zoom out a bit. Look at the map as a whole. Anything else in the article we should be paying attention to?
I'd say definitely keep an eye on the Donbas region.
Okay.
It's been a focal point since the beginning. Russia's gained a little ground lately, but Ukraine's fighting back hard. What happens there, it could really decide how the whole war goes.
And speaking of the Donbas, the article mentions some historical parallels to World War I, specifically trench warfare.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
For sure. So in World War I, they dug these huge trench systems. It was just brutal.
Wow.
A war of attrition. And we see some of that in the Donbas today, obviously, with modern tech mixed in.
Right.
And the terrain there, those flat plains, it lends itself to that kind of fighting.
Makes sense.
But it's not a perfect comparison to World War I.
Okay.
The trenches aren't as big, and both sides are using more mobile units to try and outmaneuver each other.
So it's similar, but not exactly the same.
Yeah.
It does help us understand, though, how tough and just grinding the fighting is there. And it's easy to get lost in the strategy and everything.
Yeah.
But the article also talks about the human cost.
Yeah.
The civilians stuck in the middle of all this.
All right.
It's easy to forget that these are real people whose lives are being turned upside down.
Absolutely. We can't lose sight of that. Millions of Ukrainian refugees,
Heartbreaking.
many living in neighboring countries, and those who stayed behind, they're living under constant threat. And the economic impact is huge. Ukraine's economy is devastated, and we see the effects globally, food prices, energy prices, it's all connected.
A very sobering reminder that war isn't just about maps and movements, it's about people's lives. So taking a step back, looking at everything we've talked about, what are the key takeaways you want listeners to leave with?
I'd say, first off, this war is far from over. Nobody knows how it's going to end. The situation's constantly shifting. Both sides are adapting. We have to stay informed, be critical of the information we're getting, and never forget about the human cost. It's heavy.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights.
Happy to be here.
And to everyone listening, here's something to ponder. Given the changing tactics and technology, how will conflicts like this be fought in the future? And what does that mean for both the people fighting and the civilians? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into what's happening in Ukraine. Keep learning and stay curious.